Okay, so this next video lecture is the continuation still of our module 1, so still under the classification of costs. So we will continue with the classification according to the persons regulating them. So controllable costs, so actually this was a part of the classification of costs as to its relevance to decision making. Okay, but basically here, to expound further what are controllable costs, basically these are costs that can be influenced or regulated or controlled by the manager or head which is responsible for incurring such costs. So example is our direct materials. So we also mentioned this before. Direct labor, certain factory overhead costs. These are normally controllable costs, or in other words, they may consist of the variable costs. Okay, so meaning variable costs can become controllable costs, or these are the costs that can be controlled. Because again, as we mentioned before, when we say variable costs, these are costs that are incurred once an activity is performed. So if there is no activity, therefore, no costs. Okay? So another example is the sales manager has also the control over the salary of, and commission, of their sales personnel. Okay, so when it comes to the salary, so basically there is a fixed rate for that, but there are cases where their salary is based on the number of hours that they worked for, or the number of pieces of goods that they finished working on. Okay, so that's when the manager can control their salaries. So that are the controllable costs. Of course, the opposite of our controllable costs are the uncontrollable costs. So this is the term, okay, or from the term itself, it explains itself. From its name or term. Okay, so basically, these are the costs that cannot be controlled by the managers. So this cannot be influenced also by decisions or actions of the managers, and they are imposed normally by the top management, or these are the costs that is being allocated to the different divisions, meaning these are the general and administrative expenses which are allocated in the different divisions or department. So again, these are the costs that were incurred outside of their jurisdiction or area, and are only allocated or given, okay, to share with the rest of the departments of the organization to shoulder these costs. Okay, so an example of this is a company-wide advertising cost. So here, this is allocated by the central office to the to the different departments, okay, and under the control of which are not under the control of the managers or department heads. So other examples also are the depreciation, insurance, share in rent, share in organization-wide security cost, and other general and administrative expenses. So manufacturing costs, which are our direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead, under the controllable costs, they are further classified into the following. Okay, they are classified as prime costs and conversion costs. Okay, so this is another classification since we are talking about controllable costs here. So we just added, okay, this classification, and in fact these are costs under the controllable costs. Okay, so here again, manufacturing costs, here direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead are further classified into prime costs and conversion costs. When we say prime cost, these are the costs that refers to the total cost of your direct materials and direct labor. Meaning, these are the primary costs that is incurred which are directly related to the production of our goods. That's why only materials or direct materials and direct labors are included under the prime costs. Okay? Because in this case, our direct materials, these are the items that forms part the integral or major part of our finished product. And at the same time, direct labor also are applied together with the materials to transform this into our finished inventory. So examples are steel. So these are the examples again of your direct materials. So steel in the automobiles, rubber in tires, fabric in your clothing, and so on, depending on what type of product that you are producing. What about direct labor? So direct labor, these are the salaries and wages of our factory workers, okay, who directly are engaged in the activity of transforming raw materials into finished products. So again, that is for our prime costs, our direct labor and direct materials. What about conversion costs? So in this case, when we say conversion cost, on the other hand, these are the costs that refer to those that are spent in transforming raw materials into finished products also. But in this case, we are focused on the activity of the transformation process. Okay, so basically, in the transformation or production process, the main costs that are incurred already is the application of the labor and as well as the factory overhead. Okay, so here, direct labor, as mentioned, these are the salaries and wages of our production workers. While your factory overhead, on the other hand, these are the costs that are incurred in production also, other than direct materials and direct labor, or simply our indirect labor and materials. Okay, but of course, as we also mentioned in our discussion before, factory overhead, although they do not form part the integral portion of our product, but still they are needed in the production to aid, okay, in the transformation of the raw materials into our finished products. That's why they are still classified under our manufacturing costs. So for our factory overhead, so this will include your indirect materials. So we also mentioned this before. It includes the nails, staples, adhesives, and so on. Indirect labor are the salary of our supervisor, because supervisor do not actually take part of the actual production. So they are just supervising or monitoring. It is the work of the production workers, okay, which are considered as our direct labor. We can also include the factory expenses like the factory supplies, utilities, and depreciation of the machine and equipment that are being used in production, and all other expenses incurred in the factory. So again, that are our conversion costs, direct labor, and factory overhead. So, okay. So again, prime costs are your direct materials and direct labor, because primarily these are the costs and activities or items that form part the integral or major part of our finished product. While conversion costs, these are the activities and costs incurred in the transformation process, okay, of our raw materials to finished products. So here, our raw materials, in order for it to be transformed into finished goods, we need to apply direct labor and incur factory overhead expenses. Okay, so those are the expenses or the costs, or how we classify our manufacturing costs. So for the next video lecture, we will continue with the next topic under our module 1. So we will discuss about the different cost formulas that are commonly used in production.